Dear Sam Max community, where is the love for They Came From Down There? In a fandom with thousands of people reminiscing about a 24 episode long TV series, there would obviously be a general and shared group of ideas and opinions towards certain episodes that the show was able to produce. It's pretty much no secret that the Sam Max community loves the Sam Max show. Everyone does. I think it's the greatest TV show of all time. But with that being said, you'd think that with the 24 episodes the show was able to release in its short lifespan, that the community would band together and praise each and every one of them for what they are, right? Well, not really. One opinion I hold about the Sam Max cartoon is that, despite only having 24 episodes, I think that is a good enough amount for a show that only lasted one season. Sure, the 22 episodes were only 11 minutes long, with only 2 of them being full-length. I wouldn't be surprised if all episodes combined had the same run as other short-living shows like Good Vibes or Call of the Night, but that doesn't excuse the fact that with there being more episodes in more bite-sized, well, sizes, that opens many doors and possibilities to unique scenarios. Think about it. Would you rather have 12 episodes of 22-minute lengths that follow pretty basic ideas, or 24 episodes of 11-minute lengths covering many different concepts? That's what the team were pretty much doing for the Sam Max show's first and only season. They knew that, if they wanted to make the show unique, they had to let each episode stand out on its own, just like how every single Sam Max comic up to that point were. That's why we had episodes like Christmas Bloody Christmas, The Telltale Tale, and Dysfunction of the Gods. Heck, even the worst episodes of the show, like Versus the Ugly-Ons, had a very unique concept attached to the episode. I think that's the secret sauce as to what makes both the franchise as a whole great and the show so unique. However, you don't really see the community talk about every specific episode of the show outside of certain funny clips that they remember. The community more so talks about the episodes with a normal setting, with a much more vanilla concept. Episodes like The Thing That Wouldn't Stop It, The Second Show Ever, Max's Big Day, Bad Day on the Moon, The Glazed MacGuffin Affair, The Friend for Life, and especially That Darn Gator and A Glitch in Time. So with that being said, why does the community of the series who love more simpler episodes not talk about possibly the most straightforward of the entire show? Episode 5, They Came From Down There. I think this episode rules. It's one of my favorites and it has to be the most underrated episode of the cartoon. Well, maybe not underrated. Dangly Beaver Time holds that spot, but it's still really good. They Came From Down There is an episode where Sam Max got a call from the Commissioner about suspicious activity in a small town near a river called Bohunk Lagoon, and have to investigate the case of missing people. Out of all 24 episodes of the cartoon, this episode's plot is the bare minimum of what could be considered standard. It's as normal as you can get for a show as crazy as Sam Max. Even in the first few episodes like The Second Show Ever or The Thing That Wouldn't Stop It, there were themes, narratives, and concepts that they kept those episodes stand out. They Came From Down There feels like it could have been the first episode aired with how simple it is structured. But it does make me question something. If this episode is pretty much the kind of episode that the fans like seeing the most, being just casual Sam Max shenanigans that don't have to use over-the-top concept or gimmicky ideas, why isn't this episode talked about as much? I mean, seriously, with a grounded setting that stands out, great atmosphere, and overall classic Sam Max writing, I'm shocked that an episode like this isn't considered as one of the classics. So why is that? What exactly is it about this episode that people seem to not want to talk about? Well, let's give it a look and find out. First, we have to talk about the animation of this episode. It's great. Really, really great. Seriously. The Sam Max show is already known for being quite faithful when it comes to its art style being a great adaptation from the Steve Purcell comics. But one thing many people don't touch about so much is the fact that this show's animation can be either very inconsistent or very stiff. This is how Sam Max looked in the first episode, and then the second, then the 15th, then the finale. It always seemed to me that the Sam Max show was not really that great when it comes to keeping Sam Max on model. They would either have incorrectly drawn assets or different aspects of the designs like thinner or thicker outlines. However, for whatever reason, I feel like episode 5 is the best Sam Max episode visually because of how well all the character models look without having to cut back on the animation. For example, look how sharp and accurate Sam Max look in these scenes. Look how their outlines are just the right size, and look at how they're colored so well. No joke, the reason why I put this image onto the episode's wiki page is because of how big Sam looks in this image. It's just the right shapes he's drawn in. Look at those shoulders, man. Even the geek was drawn really spot on, and not like whatever is happening in this image, looking like an NFT pic. Another thing I should praise this episode for is the amount of effects they use. Episode 5 is quite possibly the only episode of the Sam Max show I can consider very unique in its overall visuals. Because the thing that makes the episode hit the nail on the head for presentation is the sense of the atmosphere feeling so realistic. The colors of the characters change to contrast the environment's lighting. The characters are all fully shaded, the backgrounds have so many little details, many bits and pieces moving in the background, like the water having bubbles moving up or the sewer water being splashed by Sam Max's boat, and so much more to list that makes this episode stand out visually. The basement of Solitude looks like an actual secret base, the sewers look quite run down, and Bohawk Lagoon looks so eerie and dark. It's wonderful. I wish that we had more shadowy environments in the Sam Max game because of it. We then of course should talk about the writing. I think this episode is one of the best examples of how Sam Max's character should be written and how exactly a person could write a story with them. To get some things out of the way quickly, I've got to mention the humor of this episode. If this episode had a penny for every good joke it made, it would be able to afford the rare show crew jackets on the eBay listing. So many good moments. Dental floss, en masse, the Vespa, baby alligators, bunny rabbits, spoiled Max, tax returns, Max salmon, breaded chimp nuggets, the muskie, Max's impressions, and so much more. If you ask me which one I consider the best, cannibalism. I vote cannibalism. Anyways, the one aspect of the writing that I deeply respect and think is really good is the sense of mystery around it. Sorry 304, the Sam Max show beat you to it. You know what is one aspect we completely forget about Sam Max? It's that they're, at the end of the day, real policemen solving crimes, no matter how silly their scenarios and their events may be. Probably the most known example of when the story was taking Sam Max's characters as semi-serious detectives was in Culture Shock, one of the franchise's most iconic media. For me, Dick Came From Down There actually feels like an episode of Sam Max in which Sam Max tackle a case in a way that feels quite down to earth. To the point where instead of them going to beat up some goons in their normal fashion, it's about them trying to investigate and find out the mystery of the case, like actual real detectives. Sure, the later half of the episode is all about a mechanical fish in a bowl trying to take over the world by plucking brains out of people using a huge green fish just to produce millions of tiny green fish to take over the market. But even then, that plotline was used as a sci-fi comedic twist that the episode is building up to. That is the key word of this episode, build up. As soon as Sam Max gets the call from the commissioner, the audience is now invested in what happens next. We go from them riding a boat, to launching themselves into the air, to landing right on a shadowy monster, to interacting to a crazy man, to walking right into water, to looking at some sea chimps, to getting Max's brain get severely affected. Although, we've seen that happen many times before. The things that happen after each scene complement the unique and eerie build-up the episode is going for it. Not only is the scene with the crazy old man warning Sam Max about the zombies funny because of his delivery, but it also eases us in on the idea of the last survivor literally going crazy and giving subtle exposition into what's happening, what could happen if Sam Max don't watch out, and what his advice is moving forward, all the while still sounding insane and senile. And it's so well complemented by the many camera shots and different colored backgrounds. Seriously, I love this old man, and his cat Ushanka. But enough about that moggy swamp and the spooky scary environment. What about the other half of the episode with Max Salmon? Well, despite me praising the episode so far for being minimalistically rich in its writing, execution and atmosphere that's unique to the series, the other half with Max Salmon is so good as well because that is what the episode was building up for. A pretty silly yet still threatening master plan that contrasts the much different tone set in the first half. I mean, of course we still need a balance in an episode that tries to attempt something new. That's what keeps it from being a completely different show. This episode wouldn't have worked as well if the twist was something darker like, say, an eldritch monster attack. First of all, I'd like to talk about how Max Salmon was interpreted into the cartoon. He first appeared in the comic Night of the Gilded Heron Shark. In this short 5-page comic, he suddenly appears in Sam Max's office, makes his goon to slap Max, and then suddenly gets thwarted by the Rubber Pants Commandos. Despite his only one appearance in the comics, they've decided that they wanted to adapt Max Salmon's introduction and character into a more interesting and better story that could be greatly benefited by his appearance. Thus, Max Salmon got turned into this episode's antagonist. His plan was to steal the brains of locals with a huge green fish named Muskie, so that they could help produce many sea chimp creatures that look just like the ones on the box, to sell them and overtake the entire market. This is such a great change for a character like him. Max Salmon in the cartoon is portrayed as a typically evil mastermind, who he himself holds a secret side of goofiness to. I mean, yeah, it's kinda scary to pluck out brains of humans using a large menacing fish monster as a slave, but his plan of using sea chimps is just a good indicator that, while he might be the most serious and evil villain of the show, he still has a side of him that fits the world of the cartoon. Just listen to him, to the way he says breaded chimp nuggets and, well, alright then. And then we have that ending. Such a great way to close things up. There's two things I want to note on the part with Max. First, Robert Tinkler does such an amazing performance by doing so many different voices to portray Max acting as other characters while his brain gets plucked out. And two, he looks 9 years older in this image. And the best bit about all of this is that Max Salmon's plan gets foiled as soon as Max is about to be chomped. Sam literally dangles him off a toilet and tries to murder him if he doesn't drop Max. It's almost like he was just having fun mocking and watching Max fool around, but as soon as he gets grappled, his psychopathic instincts immediately kick in. And of course, I love the way everything gets tied up at the end. The locals are saved and so is Bohunk Lagoon, Max Salmon gets thrown off screen, and there's even a fun scene where we see the muskie being sent free to become an entertainment star. Now that's what I call Sam Max silliness. Overall, the second half of They Came From Down There is also a really great way to complement and pay off the build-up of the atmosphere and thrills of the first half of the episode. It's just the right amount of twisted and comedic to not overshadow any other part of the episode, and it's packed with enough content to make the events of the plot meaningful. Sorry, Trouble of the Earth Core. So, after all that we went through, now is the time to reflect and look back on our question of this video. Why is They Came From Down There not as loved or acknowledged by the community? Well, after rewatching the episode multiple times for this video, and after reflecting on the notes and things I wanted to talk about today, I think it all boils down to the fact that this episode is heavily based on its minimalism. Minimalism is a very subjective thing when it comes to media. It doesn't try to impress the viewers through sheer spectacle, complexity, or gimmicky ideas that make the episode recognizable, but it's instead all about how Sam Max's adventures can still work even without the need of extremely subversive plot elements or the intentionally questionable dark humor. For some viewers, this can feel refreshing, a rare opportunity to appreciate the basics of good storytelling without being overwhelmed by bells and whistles. But for others, especially in a show like Sam Max that thrives on chaos and unpredictability, minimalism can feel underwhelming or even forgettable. But if you ask me, that's what makes They Came From Down There so special. It's not just an anomaly in the series, but it's a reminder of how effective the show's core formula can be when you strip it down to its basic components. In a show like Sam Max, where nearly every episode is packed with bizarre twists, oddball characters and completely nonsensical scenarios, They Came From Down There feels just like a comfortably memorable episode of the first season of a show. It simply relies on the feeling of wondering what could happen next in the plot, and the excitement of getting to the bottom of the situation. Think about it. The structure is simple, straightforward, and, frankly, feels like one of the best introductions to Sam Max ever. The mystery? Clear-cut. The setting? Calm enough for a first-time viewing. The characters? Sam Max, of course, in their usual offbeat form. Even the case they're investigating, the disappearance of a few locals, could almost be considered normal compared to the series' usual high-octane craziness, and yet there's something about it that makes it stand out against its flashier counterparts. Maybe it's because the show is so known for being loud and unpredictable, but the simplicity of They Came From Down There allows it to shine in a way that some of the other episodes can't quite replicate. It's like a calm before the storm, a return to the basics that reminds you why you loved the show in the first place, and that's where it pulls ahead. While the rest of the usual wacky episodes do have their charm, and a few of them being much better than They Came From Down There, this episode proves that sometimes less is more. The humor feels more organic, the pacing smooth and tight, and the mystery itself remains engaging without relying on gimmicks or over-the-top antics. Even in a show as zany as Sam Max, this episode holds its ground by reminding us of how satisfying it can be to just sit down, relax, and watch as two of our favorite characters tackle on a case that makes us wish to see what is up ahead. So yeah, this episode isn't talked about so much because of its minimalism and atmosphere, but that's a huge part of its appeal. It's a break from the chaos, a slice of simplicity in a world that usually thrives on madness. If you haven't seen this episode yet, haven't seen this in a long while, or haven't even heard of Sam Max, I highly recommend checking it out right after this video. It's one of the best episodes of Sam Max's most underrated media, and it definitely holds a special place in my heart for being one of my favorite TV show episodes of all time. Just remember this: no flash photography. Please, no flash photography.